Hi everyone, my name is Georgia and I work for Study in Sweden at the Swedish Institute. We've organised a series of webinars over last week and the next coming weeks to tell you a little bit about what it's like to study certain subject areas in Sweden. Today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship and innovation and programs related to that. We're going to be joined by two students who are currently studying in Sweden or living in Sweden, and they'll be joining us in a minute. I'd like to also say that everybody who's watching this live is able to submit questions on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching it from. We'll try and answer the questions live as they come up, but we're not able to answer any questions about your eligibility or your specific application, whether you're eligible for a scholarship, those kind of things. But I encourage you to submit questions for the students about what it's like to be a student in Sweden and to study these programs. So let's meet our students.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Thank you very, very much for joining us. I'm great. How are you?
Doing fantastic, thanks. Just a slight correction over there. Myself, I'm an alumni.
Okay.
Graduated, but still I have the experience that I can actually share with the rest of the
Perfect.
viewers that are there.
Melissa, you're an alumni as well.
Yes, from Uppsala University and studied entrepreneurship.
Perfect. Let's start just by introducing yourselves and saying what program you studied, where you come from, and what university you studied at. Manush, would you like to start?
Yes, my name is Monashe, and I am still stationed here in Umeå in the north part of Sweden. And I came to study my master in business development and internationalization. That's a lot of entrepreneurship strategy and so forth. But it was mostly centered on entrepreneurship. And currently I'm now working as an operations area manager for Foodora. It's a food delivery company, part of Delivery Hero, managing the northern region of Sweden.
Perfect. And where do you come from originally?
I come from Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe. Okay.
Yes.
And Melissa?
Yes, so I come from Mexico. I studied the master's in entrepreneurship at Uppsala University, and I'm also currently working as a business analyst for a startup here in Uppsala called Evolar.
Perfect. Okay, Manash and Melissa, what made you choose Sweden in the first place? Would you like to start, Manash?
Yes, I can go ahead. Actually, I went to a fair and they were just advertising more about Sweden. And I mean, back home, people tend to gravitate towards English-speaking countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, since we are an Anglophone country. But then I got more open-minded to the idea of Sweden. Then I just started reading more about it, reading the literature. I got so fascinated by the nature. It was so vivid in my mind. And some of the innovations that have come through from Sweden, like Volvo, Skype, and so forth. I mean, some of the things that I used in a day-to-day basis. And I just opened more to the idea of trying something new. So hence Sweden was a destination for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about you, Melissa?
I think it was something similar. So for me, I started just looking at different universities. I was very keen on maybe a Nordic country. So after looking within Sweden, I found this program that pretty much fit all my checklist. And also after reading that Sweden was one of the countries with the best ecosystems for startups, and my plan was to study entrepreneurship. So I thought it was a perfect fit, both with the university, the country, the society, and like the nature itself, and all the surroundings. I thought it was a very good match for me.
Okay. And because entrepreneurship and innovation programs at universities in Sweden, a lot of them are open to students from different academic backgrounds. You don't necessarily have to have studied a certain thing in your bachelor's degree to be eligible to do it at the master's level. So what did you both study at bachelor's level before you came here? Melissa?
I studied a bachelor in chemical engineering with a minor in industrial management. But yes, as you mentioned, a lot of my classmates came from very different backgrounds. Some were even from medical fields, gastronomy, even. Some did have some business backgrounds. Others were more into design. So yeah, pretty much a bit of everything. Very
Yeah.
open.
And what about you, Manish?
I studied risk management and insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, before I just had a passion for entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
hence I decided to focus more of that into my master's program. But I do agree with what Melissa was saying that it was a very diverse group of students, and this fosters also co-creation, if I may use that word, especially if you're coming from different backgrounds, and then you're using all your knowledge and you kind of put it into one space and come up with something that's really amazing. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you both studied very different things.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you, Menashe, if you could tell me a little bit about your program and your university here in Sweden.
Okay. My program, as I had mentioned before, was a 2-year program. I started in 2017 and graduated 2019. And I studied at University, the business school. The program was really, really good, and we had the opportunity to actually do an exchange program within that program, which was fantastic because that allowed us to have a different way of learning based on wherever I went. I went to France, for instance.
Okay.
My school had exchange agreements. You could go to South Korea if you wanted to. So it's just the same semester that you could go and study abroad for one semester. You could also do an internship if you wanted to. But the whole idea was to just gain as much new knowledge as you can, and also creating networks, since it was business development and internationalization, which comes with a lot of networking, meeting new people, and seeing how they're doing it in other areas or spaces. So yeah, it was
Okay.
more practical in that
Mm?
sense. Yeah,
That sounds very interesting.
yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about Uppsala University and your program, Melissa?
Sure. So about Uppsala University, well, it's located here in Uppsala, and it's actually the oldest university. It was founded in 1477, so it makes it the oldest in Sweden and also the rest of the Nordic countries, I think. And about my program, it's a 1-year master's program, so it's split into 2 semesters. The first semester, it's basically 4 courses. And then the second semester, you get to choose between 2 different tracks. One of them is called New Venture Catalyst, where you can develop your own idea for a startup or a company, or you can also get an internship and work for some other company. Or you can also choose the corporate track, which is more focused into taking additional courses that would help you with this entrepreneurial setting within a corporate or a company setting. So after that, you get to do the master thesis, and after the year it's done, then you're pretty much set.
Okay. And you said that you graduated in June, right, Melissa?
Yes.
And when did you graduate, Menashe?
It was in June of 2019 as well.
2019. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what was it like living here in Sweden and for you, Melissa, studying during the pandemic? How did it affect your studies, Melissa?
Well, for me, all classes were basically online.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a bit of a bummer because I was really looking forward to having, physical classes and meeting up
Mm-hmm.
with classmates and teachers. But I think it was able to be adapted quite well through Zoom and online teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I still got to go to the library and some of the campuses to study and so. And of course, being in the city was a big plus for me. So I still got to know the city and Sweden, although not the physical classes and most of my classmates. But I think it was nice anyways. I did learn a lot, and I didn't think it affected me that much
Okay. Were you still able
on the
to
lessons.
make friends with your classmates and get to know them, or was that difficult?
I did get to know some of them, but definitely not all of them. So I think mostly when we worked with on teams, that's like the closest relationships I was able to form with classmates. But yeah, I guess it was different, like not seeing them on a regular basis physically, because it was basically only through classes, and once it was done, then that was pretty much it.
And Menashe, what has it been like for you living and working here during the pandemic?
It has been also just trying to abide, because as within our company we had the regulation of keeping informed, like in as far as the restrictions are concerned, and trying to follow them as well. So it came about with challenges. I mean, we were working from home, and also just communicating more digitally. We could not have events with a lot of people. But then also within our company, which is virtually, I mean, you have to kind of deliver the food to the people.
Yeah.
We had certain measures that we had in place to try to make it more contactless, whilst enabling employment opportunity for people, but also in a manner which does not risk people's health as well. So yeah, it was a bit of balance.
I understand.
Yeah.
And what do you think of studying in Sweden in general? Has it lived up to your expectations, Menashe?
It definitely did, because if I were to compare with my bachelor's program, for instance, it is completely different in the sense that here I got the opportunity to meet people from all over the world, which was fantastic. And each one of them has their own story. And getting to learn, being in this environment allows you to open your mind in a broader way. But then if I were to take my education background, like my bachelor's back at home, we are more in the same space, in the same environment. So you don't have as much exposure to different cultures and so forth. But yeah, this allowed me to have that. I think that was something that was very important, because that allows you to see a world in a different way as well, and learning more things about certain cultures or certain people, and so forth. So that was very insightful. I would say one of my best studying experiences, to be frank. Yeah.
That's good. And Melissa, is living in Sweden the way that you expected it would be?
Yeah, I think it pretty much has lived up to my expectations. I think it's a bit different from back home, especially the education part. I was expecting it to be much more demanding or time consuming, but I found here that it's actually quite balanced. So I was able to do other activities as well. And I think the fact that we only had one course at a time, instead of back home, we would have like 6 or 7 courses simultaneously. So I think that was much better here, because you could focus only on a single course and do like all the readings and just focus on a single topic and really get into it. So I really liked that, that was different here.
And a lot of international students that we speak to say that particularly the relationship between teachers and students here in Sweden is quite different to what they're used to back home. It's a lot less maybe informal. Is that the case for the two of you? And is there anything about the Swedish academic culture that was different here to what you're used to from back home, Menashe?
Yeah, I would say so. It was very much different, because I mean, you could call your professor or your tutor by the first name on a first name basis, but back home it's a bit more formal. It was relaxed, so that it just dropped down those barriers. Of, okay, I mean, of course, you do acknowledge that this is my tutor, but then that when when those barriers are dropped down, you feel much more relaxed to approach they're much more approachable, they're much more open to helping out and so forth. So that's really nice to have.
That's good. And what about you, Melissa?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's how Manisha said. You call them on a first name basis, and they're super laid back, very open to always helping. They're like an email or a call away to any question or thing that they can help you with. So I think it's a very good relation, very good for education, because they make it comfortable for students to really ask whatever comes to their minds, or ask for any help that they would need, without like fearing if there would be like some sort of weird stuff going on, like being too formal or something. So I think it's really good.
That's
Very
good.
accessible.
So we have a question that's come in from somebody watching who has said, is it possible to study and work at the same time? And I can answer a little bit of that question. As an international student, you have the legal right to work while you're in Sweden on the side of your studies. However, different programs have different course loads, and sometimes there's not enough time for students to have a part-time job on the side of their studies. It can also be very difficult, especially if you're living in a student city like Uppsala and Umeå, to find a part-time job, because there's a lot of other students who are also looking for work. But Melissa or Menashe, did either of you work on the side of your studies while you were here studying?
I didn't, but I remember that some of my classmates did, and I think it is possible. But of course, then your free time is pretty much non-existent, because you need to take the weekends to catch up on readings and activities, and also if you're working on a team and the rest is not having a job, then sometimes the hours might differ when you need to like be together to work. So it might be a bit difficult, but if you're an organized person and are willing to sacrifice like any other free time, then I guess it would be possible.
And Menashe, what was your workload like when you were studying? Did you have enough time to potentially find a part-time job? And if so, did you find a part-time job?
I mean, for me, I tried to find a part-time job towards the end of my studies, but then I mean, taking a look back, I definitely had the time. So I would say it also depends with what kind of program that you're doing, because I have some colleagues had virtually no time to even hang out with friends. Those that were more like into design, they were pretty much occupied with projects, which were structured in a fun way that they had their own friends within their own school, the design school, for instance. But then some other program, mine was very relaxed in the sense that we had 1 month, we had one course, and you had more time to doing any part-time work that you wanted to do. But towards the end of my program, I started working part-time in restaurants. You can get part-time work in restaurants. You can get part-time work in supermarkets, which is amazing, or cafes. It's really nice. It comes in handy for the Wally as well. So that's super nice. Yeah.
Okay. We have another question that's come in that said, are the studies in Sweden back to offline format? I think yes, at the majority of universities they are. Somebody else has asked, how is the culture of innovation and entrepreneurship in Sweden? Melissa, would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't know if, I mean, some people might be familiar, but there's, for example, Spotify, that's super well-known startup. It's from Sweden. There's also Klarna, the online banking payment system. There's also King, which makes games like Candy Crush. So there are a lot of famous startups coming from Sweden. And this is not by chance. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that Sweden really sets a good ecosystem and support for companies. I think also it's one of the countries that has startups that fail the least. And at least in Uppsala, I'm familiar with some Drivhuset, who also supports entrepreneurs who are trying to build up their own startups. So there are like these incubators who provide support to entrepreneurs or young companies with anything they might need to pretty much help them succeed. So I think there are a lot of mechanisms of support for innovation and entrepreneurship within Sweden. I think it really makes a difference in the success of them.
Menashe, when you were studying, did you have much contact with the industry?
Yes, I would say so. Partly because I was a bit more proactive on that side. And I just wanted to immerse myself into these circles of startups, incubators, and networking platforms. Me and my colleagues, we even had our own startup within the university, and we're encouraging other students to come on board, and then we would connect them to the industry, and so forth, and back and forth, and knocking on people's doors, and like that. I would say, like what Melissa was saying early on, that the landscape itself alone promotes or encourages or fosters innovation in that sense. You find that there are communes or municipalities, and these usually have budgets for these things, and they have certain companies that allow residents within that particular municipality to start something, or to something innovative, and then they set the space for them. They are available resources in terms of space, coaching, which is for free if you want to start your own something, and so forth, and leading you to perhaps those that can fund. They even competitions for like venture capital or Vinova, or that aid in finance if you'd like to get your startup going. So I mean, the environment is really, really good for that as well. Yeah.
Okay. There's another student or someone who's watching who's asked the question, how many international students were in your programs? From how many different countries did they come from? Could you tell us a little bit about your classmates and what your classes looked like, if it was mostly international students or Swedish students, and how big your classes were? Menashe, you can
Sure.
talk.
Okay. I think we're about 20 or so in my program, Masters for Business Development. But then there was accounting, finance, management, and we're all mixed, Swedish and international students, and people coming from as far as Panama, down in Africa. We're just mixed students, and I think that was really, really amazing. I think they try to also make the balance within the classes such that you also get to learn more from Swedes as well, and learning from other students from other countries across the world. So it was very diverse in that regard. And then when you're doing certain programs or certain classes, you find that you tend to overlap with students from maybe accounting, students from finance, and then you can get to come together if you have common core courses, I'd say.
Yep. Yeah. Melissa, what did your classmates and your courses look like?
Yeah, I think in total we were around 40 students for my program, and I think it was roughly half of them international, from people all over the world, not only Europeans, I would say. There were people from Iran, New York, Thailand, Serbia, Finland, Netherlands, just to name a few countries, but there were super diverse, I would say. And yeah, I think this is also a very enriching experience, because you get to know about how problems are solved in different countries, or if they have certain, I don't know, like laws or approaches to certain problems, or what their solutions would be. And of course, there were also a lot of Swedish students. So it's also nice to get to know local people, because they can, of course, teach you more about the local area or how it's done in Sweden, or
Yeah.
super helpful when there's Swedish websites and they're the ones who can translate stuff like that. So I think it's more or less 50-50 Swedish and international students.
Okay. Somebody's asked if it's possible to study in English. Yes, it is. Sweden offers over 1,000 master's programs in English. But that's a question for both of you. Do you think it's possible to live in Sweden without speaking Swedish? And how easy is it to get around with English only? Melissa, you can continue.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. I mean, myself, I don't speak any Swedish yet, just some basic words. But pretty much everyone speaks English, you know. Definitely the classes are all held in very good English, academic English, as well as the classmates have a very high standard. And with life, I think, for example, cashiers at supermarkets, they always speak English. If I mean, they usually speak Swedish first, but then you always say like, "Oh,
Yeah.
we speak English," and oh yeah, of course. Or at restaurants as well, or at any shop. I think it's very common for people to have a very good English in general. So there hasn't been any issue for
Yeah.
me, I think.
And Menashe, when you were studying, did you have the opportunity to learn any Swedish, even if you were studying in English?
Yes, I did. There was actually a free course that you could take. They have
Through the university?
through the university, as well as outside the university. There's a program called SFE, Swedish for International People.
Yep.
You can sign up there if you have a personal number or like an ID number. You can sign up for Swedish for immigrants, and then you just go there, and it's completely free. You can learn so much, and I've used all these opportunities to learn Swedish. I mean, I'm not proficient, but then I mean, I do go around very well in English, even within my workspace. I can converse a bit now, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's difficult, Swedish?
I think it depends, because it's a Germanic language, and depending on the way you're coming from, I'm coming from Africa, and it is nowhere near that. And also, I think one thing that's important is the willingness and the open-mindedness to taking it on. I think that really helps a lot. I have friends that have been able to just get it within like 3 months. So, for instance, you can just like start learning some lessons, and then perhaps sign up to assist in nursery schools for kids, because kids don't judge, and they teach you very simple Swedish, and then you can get to learn as fast as you can. I know people who have done this, and within 3 months they're able to speak very well, and articulate themselves very well, and you don't get shy anymore after that. But then also you have libraries that equipped with so many resources for you to learn gradually at your own pace. I mean, there's just so many platforms you can learn Swedish from if you'd want, depending on your schedule and time as well.
I think one of the things that makes it difficult sometimes to learn Swedish is because Swedish people love speaking English so much. So when they hear that you're not fluent, they immediately hop over to English and then continue the conversation that way, which makes it hard to practice.
Yeah, I had one of my friends recently who was like, Muna, you need to decide whether you fully want to learn Swedish or not. I'm like, I'm going there.
So one of the big stereotypes of Swedish people is that they can be quite cold or difficult to get to know. How do you think that meets reality, Melissa?
I would say it's partly true, but only at first. Like, it's not like they will approach you instantly, but if you do approach them, they're super friendly. So I think it's more of that gets mixed up. So they're really sweet and really open and very helpful. but they usually have a hard time making the first step. I think they see it as they don't want to like get in your way or bother you. But if you approach them, they're super friendly. They're really nice people in general.
Mm. Okay, that's good to hear. um, how do you cope with the Swedish weather? Because I can imagine that it's very different to your home countries. Menashe, you're up in the north of Sweden. It must be extra cold and dark
Yeah, I mean,
there.
the very first year was, I think it was -35. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
But we have here in the north one saying that never bad weather, only bad
Hmm.
dressing. So you try to make sure that you are as warm as possible. But then with the darkness, I
Mm,
think there are measures that you can put in place, like taking vitamin D supplements to try to
mm-hmm,
expose yourself to as much light indoors. There are light rooms, especially in universities,
mm,
where you can try to get some light, and also doing some activities. If you like to go to the gym, if you like to cook, you can do this. Just being active really
mm,
really helps. And if I were to just pick on from the point that Melissa spoke about early on, like making friends with Swedes, I think one thing that's very important that I realized, or I took advantage of, was at the onset. Nobody knows anyone. You're all at
mm,
the same level. So if you coming through take the initiative to going out there and reaching out to people, then they get to know you. Then they're more likely to be open to you as well and reach out to you. And once people get to know you, the locals, it's very easy. They'll stick with you. They will be your friend.
yeah.
So yeah, I would say that also having friends during winter times, it really helps you do activities together. If you're gonna go to the gym, work out together, or you're cooking in together, it
Hmm.
really really helps in this regard.
Yeah. What do you think, Melissa? Do you find it difficult with this weather, or is it okay?
Um, I personally prefer the cold, so I
Yeah,
really like it here.
yeah,
But I mean, even in spring and summer, it was amazing. I mean, we even reached 30 degrees, which I thought was impossible here.
Mm,
But I think it's good weather in general, except for as you said, the darkness. That's I think the hardest part during winter.
yeah.
But of course, there are mechanisms to cope with.
yeah,
You can make it super cozy
yeah,
indoors with candles and Christmas, and of course, once it snows, it's absolutely beautiful
yeah,
and it really
Mm,
cheers people up. But other than that, I think it's good in general. I mean, it's of course cold if you're not wearing the right clothes,
mm,
but indoors it's super nice always. Even buses have the heating on,
yeah.
so
yeah.
it's mostly about just having the right jacket and boots,
Mm.
and you're set. Indoors, it's super nice always.
I do appreciate that it's always warm inside, but I can find it a bit um, annoying when you have to go into the supermarket or something. So you've got your big jacket on, and then you
Yeah.
go inside and you get all hot and sweaty, and then you go back outside and
Yeah,
it's freezing again. But I think that's a great tip,
yeah,
Menashe, that you just have to also make sure that you get outside when it is light, even if it's just for a quick walk on your lunch break or something. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, we have at peak winter, we only have about 3 hours of light here in the north,
Yeah,
and that's not much.
it's
But
not much.
also, you find people. I also like the cold. It's
Mm,
almost like a style, or it's a good feeling that I cannot explain, because you feel warm in the rest of the bodies, but you have what are called frozen ankles, or like this cold rush in your face, which is a good
yeah.
feeling. I like it myself.
Okay.
Which is quite weird for someone coming from the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
yeah.
I was going to ask you, Manesha, if you've even seen the Northern Lights living up
Oh
there.
yes, I have. I
Mm,
have. It's you cannot describe it. It's magical,
mm,
especially if you see the ones that are dancing. They're really nice. I mean, I've had the opportunity to travel to also other neighboring countries like Norway, where you can actually see them really in different colors as well. They're really beautiful. It's an understatement to say that they're really beautiful. You have to see for you to believe.
Yeah.
I would have to say, yeah.
So I'd just like to ask you a little bit. We've talked about your schedules and how when you were students, your course loads varied and that you had time to do some things, be social outside of school hours. So what kind of extracurricular activities did you do when you were a student, and now that you're working sort of outside of working hours, what do you do?
I can start. When I was a student, I would spend most of my time like in startup spaces. So there's like so many events, networking events, meeting new people. That's how I used to actually spend most of my time, because I enjoy that generally, like meeting new people and making networks, connecting people, and so forth. So I spent most of my time doing that. And then if you can get some time to meet up with friends, I would do that as well. But then now that I'm working, my schedule is now different because I work from 9 to 6. And
Okay.
then that leaves like very little time to doing so many things. But then I try to go to the gym. Like this time, I'm planning to doing cross country skiing for
Okay.
like ahead of the winter. So I'm training for that. So that's something that one can do. I also
So
do,
that's skiing when it's flat.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I also do climbing, rock climbing. So we have a gym and it has a climbing hole. So when it's winter time, I go with my friends. We do climbing indoors. This can be after work. And then when it's summertime, we do outdoor climbing. So we can travel to another city or to the nature and find these spots where you can do this in Sweden. And then you have your harnesses, and then with your friends, just climbing the rocks. It's quite a fulfilling thing. Then
Yeah.
on weekends, sometimes I get to meet up with friends and just make some food, some dinner, play games. I think that's also really nice to do. Yeah.
And what about you, Melissa? Did you spend much time at the student nations here in Uppsala when you were a student?
Not really, because the pandemic was still on and there
Oh, of
were some
course.
restrictions. But I did get to do a lot of activities, at least with my housemates. So since we were all kind of in the same situation that we couldn't go out as much, we would spend a lot of time at the house, and we would do activities like cooking together, playing board games, doing film nights, that sort of stuff. And of course, also getting to know Uppsala and its main places, downtown, and also going maybe on the weekends to Stockholm, which is super near Uppsala. It's like 40 minutes away by train. So I would really enjoy going also to Stockholm and going maybe to museums or just the city, and getting to know a bit of Sweden, maybe some weekend trips as well, camping or going, yeah, on hikes, or out on walks and just being out and about in the city.
And can you tell me a little bit about your student accommodation, Melissa, and if you received help from the university to find it?
Yes, so as an international student, the university does guarantee you a housing spot. I was offered a place in Flogsta, which is a student corridor, but since I was coming here with my partner and it's only for one person, I had to look for accommodation by myself. And then I joined several Facebook groups that advertise some spaces. And I was really lucky that I found this shared house, or collective, as they call it, with three other housemates. And there was a big room available. So we ended up having a sort of interview, and I got the room. So I think it was very lucky, and I'm really happy here because I got to meet a local person from Sweden, as well as some other international students. And they are now pretty much my best friends, and we share a lot of activities together.
That's
So it's
great. So
really
you're
nice
still living
to
there
live
today?
here. Yes.
Yes. And Menashe, what was your student accommodation like?
Um, beforehand, we had to, the university facilitated housing for international students. But then this was short term. You had to apply from different housing companies. But then this was not as hard, especially if you're a student. It's not quite hard
Okay.
if you're an international student. But if you know that, or if you have the slightest of interest, my advice to anyone who's watching is that just try to find out from that particular city that you'd like to live in Sweden, and finding out if there are any real estate companies, and then just registering yourself in, and then you get in a queue, so that when the time comes for you to get housing or to look for housing, then you have queue points, because there's a queue system. And then this really, really helps for you to get something that's really nice, or that suits your needs much more, because you have the most preference when there are any housing available. So yeah, that's one good tip I would give to.
Yeah,
Before
that
I
is a
came
good
here,
tip.
I had a friend who was like, "You're applying to Umeå, you will thank me later. Just register and log in this company site, and then it's as easy as that." I think after 6 months, you have to log in again and then log out, and that's enough. So if you have maybe a separate page where you have saved the housing companies, and then you just like remind yourself in your calendar to just like log in before it expires. Otherwise, you'll lose those queue points. That's a tip I would give to those who are watching.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of our 45 minutes now. When you are an international student in Sweden, you have the opportunity to extend your Swedish residence permit to stay in Sweden and look for work. So that's obviously what you have both done, and then you've been able to find work. How long did it take you to find work within your industry after you'd finished studying here in Sweden? Menashe?
Actually, for me, is when I finished my studies. Towards the end of my studies, I started to form my own company with my friends.
Okay.
Yeah, so that allowed me also. There's that option that if you finish, you can also start your own company, and you apply for work permit based on that, or
Yep.
you can find employment. But then, right when we were doing that, the pandemic hit, and everything that we had been working on was a bit skeptical with the partners that we had arranged with, because it was so uncertain. It was right at the onset of the pandemic, and things were not clear. So I had to look for an alternative, but that did not take me a month to finding that, or perhaps I would say I was lucky. But even if I know quite a lot of my colleagues who have found work, especially in the south, like in Stockholm or Gothenburg, it's fairly easy for you to find. I think it's just how proactive you are at doing it.
Yeah.
That really matters.
And what about you, Melissa?
Yeah, so as you said, I also applied for the extension to seek for a job, but in my case, it was actually that the job found me. So I was taking a break after finishing school. I decided to take the summer off, and then I was spending a couple of months back home in Mexico. So I decided not to look for a job because I was planning on visiting for an extended time. But actually, while I was in Mexico, I got contacted through LinkedIn. And then after the interview process and such, I ended up getting the job. So that's why I say it actually found me. But it ended up taking 4 months approximately.
Okay. Well, that's very, very nice to know. So what are your plans for the future, both of you? Are you planning on staying in Sweden long term, Menashe?
For me, it's basically just keeping an open mind, because I like to gain international work experience, and this is
Yep.
what I'm getting currently from my work, and just to see how my position unfolds and how much growth I intend to have. But then I always keep an open mind. That's one thing for sure. If
Yep.
something comes up, why not? I'm that kind of person. Yeah.
I imagine in your industry, it's probably a very good attitude to have too, because you have to
Yeah.
take opportunities when they
Yeah.
arise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about you, Melissa?
Yeah, I guess my plans were to graduate and find a job, which I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And I really see myself in Sweden for at least one more year and possibly
Mm-hmm.
even longer. So far it's been great, and I think it's gonna keep on being that way, and I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to staying here.
That's great. So, anybody who is watching who's considering applying to a program in Sweden that's related to entrepreneurship and innovation, do you both encourage them to do so? And do you have any words of advice for them before we finish? Menashe.
Definitely, I would say go for it. I cannot put a price to how much experience I've had so far. And I think also one other thing is that don't be shy even to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Reaching out to those that are, LinkedIn is such a great resource for this too.
Mm-hmm.
Finding those that are in within the particular space and just reaching out to say, hey, I intend to come to Sweden. Can you help with this? How do I do this, or what is the weather like, or just this kind of questions. Don't be shy to ask. Just do it. I think that's my advice to the viewers. Could you hear me?
Mm.
I think her.
Yeah, I think, uh, but I think you're still on. But I mean,
Yeah,
I'll continue anyways.
yeah. You can continue.
Um, So for me, I would say to definitely consider applying if it's something that's interesting for you, and to not be scared if you don't have any like business experience or entrepreneurship experience. You don't need any of that.
Yeah.
Um, as I said previously, there were people from medical backgrounds, design, gastronomy, from
Mhm.
pretty much any type of industry. So as long as you're really willing to learn and this is something that interests you, then definitely apply. That's the only way of getting in, is to actually apply. So just be sure to meet the deadlines and all the paperwork, and to take the risk, and it's something you won't regret. I'm sure of it.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
My internet, I think I just. That was a very, very badly timed internet connection issue. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to the both of you for joining us today. It's been really great talking to you. And thank you to everybody who's watched. All of the information that you need to study in Sweden can be found on our website, www.studyinSweden.se. And you can also continue to write questions on the videos posted on our Facebook and YouTube channels, and we'll have somebody after the webinar go through them and try and answer as much as possible. Okay, well, thank you very, very much for joining us, everybody, and we can say goodbye now.
Bye.
Bye.